Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Kinder. I'm the Chief Executive of the Regional Studies Association. I'm absolutely delighted this morning to introduce the very first meeting of the RSA's Sprint Network, which is organised in collaboration with the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization and the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. So welcome to colleagues from both of those institutions. The Sprint Network does have its own page on the RSA website, and I would encourage everybody, when you get a chance after this network meeting this morning, to go and have a look at that page. It's very exciting to read, actually, about the ambitions of the Sprint Network to make important and, I think, novel contributions to regional innovation policy development. So to this morning, then, I think, as you may have inferred from the range of organisations and the speakers involved, the network meeting this morning aims to stimulate a dialogue between researchers based in higher education institutions, but also those working elsewhere in research institutes and in policy settings. And we're also aiming this morning to explore some cutting-edge research methods. So there's a lot to look forward to. I'm very excited to have the chance to introduce it. For those not familiar with the RSA, just a few words from me, if I may. We're a charity registered in the United Kingdom, but very much supporting a global community of regional and urban researchers, policymakers, and practitioners. We're also a membership organisation with a presence in over 80 countries. And I would urge you, if you're not a member, to join the RSA today. I often describe the association as providing a kind of professional infrastructure for the regional and urban research community. We do this in a number of ways, by publishing 6 academic journals, for example, 2 academic book series, also by running conferences and events, and of course by advocating for the importance of regional and urban research more broadly. Most relevant, I think, to this morning, we also support research and researchers by awarding grants, such as the Research Network grant that supports the Sprint Network. And speaking as a still relatively new chief executive of the association, it does seem to me that research networks, because they operate across territories, be they RSA territories or international ones, are a really fabulous way of connecting researchers from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, but with a shared and joint focus. And I know already in the months I've spent here at the RSA, from talking to people right across our community, that these research networks are very often the way in which people enter the field of regional studies in the first place. And they very, very clearly support our aim of producing research today, policy tomorrow. So we're proud and excited to support Sprint for all the reasons I've set out today. In terms of housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded. It is going to be made available on the Research Network page, as I mentioned right at the beginning. If we could ask you please to put any questions that you have into the Q&A box, and please, if you are on social media, posting out about the event, please use the hashtag RSA webinar. So I wish you a very productive network meeting today. If you have any thoughts and ideas, by the way, for ways in which the RSA could support this network more effectively, please do pass those thoughts on to one of the Sprint organisers. That's Dima, Eduardo, Ben, and Martina. So thanks for listening, and I'm going to pass you over straight away into the very safe hands of Dima.
Thank you very much, Alan. Let me just share the screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see it. I would like to start by extending a warm welcome to everyone. This is the first official Sprint event, and we're very excited that we were able to draw in such a huge crowd. So before we dive right into it, we wanted to take just a few seconds to introduce our network. So Smart Policies for Regional Innovation, Sustainability and Transitions, or SPRINT, is an RSA-funded research network We focus on the transition from S3 to sustainable S3 or S4, considering how the new approach aligns with other territorial policies, which aim to either drive sustainable economic development through green innovation, tackle regional inequality, or fostering regional resilience. So these are basically the three pillars we want to concentrate. And Sprint builds on our experience as a Marie Curie network under the name of Polis. There's 4 of us handling the principal activities of the network, and I take just a moment to acknowledge them. Martina is a researcher at the London School of Economics, and Eduardo and Benjamin are finishing their PhDs now at Utrecht University. And I'm also a postdoc at the United Lab in Corvinus University of Budapest. But a real research network thrives on the connections and contributions of many. So actually Sprint looks more like this. And I think it's important to highlight that Sprint is not a closed club. It's an open and growing community that you can also contribute to. We have several events planned for the next year and a half. So just to give you a sneak peek, very shortly in November, Sprint will host a special session at the RSA Winter Conference on place-based regional innovation policies and inequality, where we'll have 4 excellent speakers. In May, we'll organize a second special session at the RSA annual conference in Porto. We have bursaries available to cover expenses for RSA members who are willing to present at the special session. In addition, we'll organize a second online event together with Technopolis Group, which is one of the major policy consultancies, where we focus on communicating strategies for transforming research results into policy recommendations. And finally, we're planning a full-day in-person workshop in Vienna in about a year from now, which we'll co-host with the Austrian Institute of Economic Research. And we will be announcing all of these events on our page on Twitter or on X. So please give us a follow if you want to stay tuned. And you can also keep track of our activities through the official RSA webpage. With so much in store, we're excited for what's ahead, and we hope that you will join us. And I would like to now pass the floor to Eduardo, who will introduce today's speakers. And yeah, you can take it away.
Thank you very much, Dima, for such a nice overview of the network. And so it's our extremely pleasure to have today three great speakers. We have Julio Raffo, Federico Moscatelli, and Dario Diodato. And Julio Raffo is the head of the Innovation Economy section at the Department of Economics and Data Analytics of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. But before joining WIPO, he was also a researcher at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, and he holds a Bachelor in Economics from the Universidad de Buenos Aires, a master's degree and PhD from the University of Paris, Paris North. His main research interests are the economics and metrics of innovation and intellectual property, with a particular focus on the intersection with socioeconomic development. And he has also extensively published in leading scientific journals, such as the Research Policy, the European Journal of Development Research and Regional Studies, among others. Federico Moscatelli is a research fellow at the World Intellectual Property Organization, also the Innovation Economy section. He holds a Bachelor in Economics and a Master in Management and Analytics, both from the University Torquato di Tella in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Federico's work covers a wide range of topics, among which the implementation of indicators and metrics for innovation policy. Lately, Federico has been particularly focused on the application of economic complexity techniques to improve evidence-based innovation policy. And finally, we have Dario Diodato, who is an economist at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Seville. He obtained his PhD in economic geography at Utrecht University, and after that, he was a postdoctoral research fellow at Harvard University's Growth Lab. Before doing his PhD, he was researcher in urban and regional economics at the PVL, Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, in Den Haag. And his research interests include technological change, structural transformation, migration and technology diffusion, cities and regions, human capital and skills, and for sure, economic complexity and economic resilience. Dario has also published in leading scientific journals, such as the Journal of Economic Geography, Research Policy, Journal of Urban Economics, Industry and Innovation, and the European Economic Review, among others. So with no further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, that will be Julio. So if you can share your screen, Julio, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you, Eduardo, and to all the organizers. Very glad to be here. Let me share my screen. Okay, I hope I'm sharing the right one. As requested, I prepare a very general presentation where I'm going to be telling you a little bit of what we do at WIPO, and particularly in the innovation economy section. So I'm going to basically fly over our different activities, particularly the research ones that might be of interest for this community. And then Federico, I don't know if it's going to be immediately after or after Dario, Federico will actually dive deeper into one of the research that I think is the one of more interest to this community, but not the only one, hopefully. So as mentioned, I am the head of the Innovation Economy section. We are part of the Department of Economics and Data Analytics, which is part of a larger sector, the IP and Innovation Ecosystem sector, which has many, many functions. I will not detail everything, but you guys are going to have the slides, so you can go and you can come with questions for more details of the many, many things that we do. But in particular, there in blue on the left, we do IP statistics and data analytics on IP and innovation-related stuff, and particularly close to our heart, to Federico's and my heart, the innovation economic research, like the ones I'm going to be presenting. The scope of what we do, and a little bit the goal of what we do, of course, is try to contribute to the field. But in particular, and you're going to see in the report that Federico is going to go in a little bit deeper, is to assist policymakers with what we call evidence-based policymaking based on the research that we perform. And for that, we try to develop data, methodologies, and of course, reports, and in some cases, also economic research that ends in peer review journals. We try to be, of course, a to-go place for researchers, so we will welcome any kind of request that we may get from this community. This could be as simple as ideas of what we should be doing next, but also access our content, including our data and so on. So as mentioned, we try to develop innovation-related research and tools. By tools, I mean data, but also methodologies. Some of you might suffer some disambiguation techniques in data that I did match it a long time ago. Now we have also one on gender. This is just examples of how we can be very applied on the tools. We have been migrating to Python thanks to my colleagues who are more competent in Python than I am. But also we do research. An example is, of course, the World IP report that I'm showing up there, but also all the working papers that we have. The one that appears there is the one that Federico will be presenting later on. But we have way larger scope of research, which includes gender, which includes certainly development. We try to look at details of IP beyond patents, because quite often when we discuss innovation in our community, we think only on patents. But if you move away for, let's say, a more industrialized world, you're going to observe that actually patents are not widely used worldwide, and trademarks, designs, etc., are much more used to forms of appropriation, and particularly related to innovation strategies. So we try to do this, and sometimes we focus in some specific sectors or industries or technologies, which I'm going to be mentioning in a second. Just to give a bit of credit, this is the team in our section. The department, of course, is much wider, so we are like about 20 people in the department. I just mentioned this because if you want to interact not only with Federico, who's presenting, but on any of the topics I'm going to be describing, you might be defer to one of these very knowledgeable and kind colleagues that we have. Content of the section. Well, we do the World IP report series. I'm going to be mentioned that a little bit later. We do the working papers. One example is the one that Federico will be presented, but we also have other stuff. We have a series of development studies, which are aiming precisely to policymakers. This might be a little bit high level or superficial for this research community, but sometimes there are interesting entry point. We have some guidance also meant for government agencies and IP offices on how to do some stuff. So they're also going to be a little bit, I would say, too entry level for this community, but sometimes they could be an interesting way of understanding. More interesting, on the right side of this slide, you have what we call the web stories. We try to have a little bit in line what many journals are doing, having more of a highlight or a more intuitive way of sharing our research results with some interactive charts. Is that still in development? But you're going to find that some of them, particularly the gender ones or the ones with the World IP report, are slightly more developed. And one of our maybe not super known in the research community, but actually quite successful, we have this web page we call Resources for Researchers, where we are somehow mapping data, relevant literature, whatever, metrics, and even some libraries as a way of an entry point for researchers who want to understand innovation and IP and so on. Some of that is just HTML and in a similar fashion as the web stories, but others are actually part of our GitHub that you can download directly, like the gender dictionaries or the gender libraries. And we have also a possibility to collaborate. Eduardo is one of those examples. Collaborate directly with us. We have a shared Jupyter Lab environment that's called Jupyter Hub, where we can collaborate, share some data, and even collaborate with code and so on. This is growing, but still also changing over time. But if any of you is interested in participating in some of this, it's something that we can discuss. Delving a little bit deeper on the research, let me tell you that, of course, we have this gender work. As I mentioned, we have some guidelines that are associated, especially meant for government agencies, how they should measure gender in their data. We tell them how to use our dictionary, but also we tell them other ways of how they can compute or how they can gather that important data. We have, of course, a series of working papers at this point related with this gender. We hopefully we have more starting, I would say, next year, because we have a new gender fellow that will start mid-October. And I invite you to check. This is a topic that's growing very, very fast. And we are co-hosting with some colleagues at WIPO in November, at the end of November, the first meeting on gender research related to innovation and IP. So be posted. There's going to be developments out of this, and maybe some of you have submitted the paper. We're notifying accepted this week and early next week. So if you have submitted, bear with us. You will hear from us soon. We have certainly the complexity research, the innovation complexity that Federico is leading, and he will explain that in detail. But basically, there we are trying to understand how the very different innovation capabilities can be combined in order to basically better describe characteristics of innovation ecosystems, which is one of our priorities. We have, as I mentioned, the Resources for Researchers, where we publish all the tools. So basically, every new research that we do that requires the preparation of a new methodology or a new method or even a new data set, we try then to make it available to the entire community. We are better in sharing some things than others due to privacy of data, or until very recently, because we didn't have a place where to host our data, and we were using the Harvard Dataverse. However, the good news is that our colleagues from the library, they created a repository, a WIPO repository for data. So from now onwards, we should be better at sharing that data with the broad community. We, of course, going to go on a case-by-case basis to start putting up there. So if there is one in particular data set that you would like to have access, let us know, and we will maybe put it up in the priority of that. There is a very new project which is led by my colleague Intan on access to IP, and we're trying to basically understand how costly it is for different applicants and different creators and inventors around the world to file and navigate the very complicated procedures of IP. This is ongoing research, but it's probably going to be out there next year with very interesting results and a crossover with development. We have, and that's very interesting, we have a whole line of research on what we call broadly defined AgTech. Some people like to call also bioeconomy, like OECD colleagues. basically, we have been studying the agriculture-related technologies and industries in many of our World IP reports. We have a very successful case study that we did on the coffee supply chain for the World IP report 2017. We have described the crop biotech hotspots in the World IP report of 2019. And more recently, we have described AgTech in and a little bit the complexity of that in the latest World IP report, the one that was published this year, and the one that Federico will be explaining, not the AgTech part, but the general methodology. But this means that we have a lot of research. We are trying to consolidate that in some form, maybe an edited book or something like this. But if you're interested in that part of the research, just to let you know that this is coming. And we have also analyzed basically what we call the DGPTs, the general purpose technologies that are related to digitalization. We explored that in the previous World IP report of 2022. This is quite successful, and we got several requests of updating that data. There is a companion report from WIPO. This is not from us, but it's from colleagues from the same sector. We have analyzed also the trends, technological and scientific trends of AI in scientific papers and patents. This is more of a patent landscape, what they did, but working together, we came with basically this joint research space, which is very, very interesting. And if you're interested on those recent developments, I invite you to check. We have received, for instance, several requests to access this data, which is, of course, a bit complicated because it's moving so rapidly that it's hard to keep updated in the strategy of delimiting this data set. But if any of you is interested, I'll be happy to comply. To summarize where we stand on this, we have all the series of World IP reports. They are very thematic, so they're very different one of each other. In some cases, like for instance, in this community, I will expect that you will be particularly interested in the one that we published in 2019, the Geography of Innovation, where there we came with this methodology of mapping clusters based on patent and scientific publication data, trying to not be constrained by the political divisions, right, administrative divisions that each country can have, because you know better than I that is not that easy to then compare across the world. So there is an unpublished library that we should publish soon on how to apply these clusterization methods to very large data sets, and particularly mixing different types of variables, and the data set itself. We have not yet done a full geocoding of all the data, but we might soon do it, and that can be shared. At least our patent data can be shared on this. And then, as I mentioned before, there is the working paper series and the development studies that can be accessed in our website. I forgot to put the timing. How I'm doing on time, Eduardo?
Sure, right. I mean, you have 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes. No, maybe Federico, as you wish. Do you want me to introduce the World IP report, or you want to jump directly? Is Federico coming right after me, Eduardo? Is that correct?
Yes, he is.
Federico.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Julio. So, thank you, everybody. My name is Federico Moscatelli. As Julio mentioned, I work with him in the Innovation Economy section in the Department of Economics and Data Analytics at WIPO. And I am here to present the working paper named Can We Map Innovation Capabilities? That was an input for the last World IP report on that Julio just mentioned, that was on making innovation policy work for development. So, as Julio mentioned, why map capabilities? So we think that by doing this, we can get useful information that can help us provide inputs for our member states on how they can use it to make innovation policies, right? To get informed innovation policies. So, of course, we do not start from zero here. We understand that innovation is multidimensional. in the literature, we've seen that the most common dimensions that they use is technologies, science, production, and others. We also understand that functioning innovation ecosystems are expected to have a full range of both inter- and intra-dimensional interactions. Ecosystems also specialize only in a set of them because it's very rare that innovation ecosystems can do everything, right? And the final thing is that the capabilities that these ecosystems have are not all the same. They vary in terms of complexity. And basically, they vary in how rare they are and how many other capabilities you need to develop them. So now, one of the issues we see when looking at these dimensions of innovation is that innovation is quite concentrated. And when we look at the distribution of science, patents, and exports, we see that 45, 64, and 35% of all these dimensions are concentrated in only 4 countries. And we have more than 190 member states, right? So how can we measure innovation capabilities in this scenario and at the same time inform as many member states as we can? So what we do first is we look at data that can help us capture these dimensions. We look at international outputs to be able to compare between countries, and we have 626 innovation capabilities that come from 169 come from science using scientific publications from Web of Science, 172 technological capabilities based on patents from our WIPO data, and 295 say productive capabilities which are based on exports, right? Because again, we're looking at international outputs only, right? And this data comes from UN Comtrade. Now, after that, once we have these 626 capabilities, we need to decide what it means for a country to have a capability in a field of innovation. So on one side, one thing that the literature does is they look at the relative capabilities, which in this case, the country will have a capability if they're relatively specialized, indicated by the revealed comparative advantage indicator. And the pros here is that it captures the choices of specialization of countries, and it has high coverage because by definition, if every country will get capabilities as long as they have at least one output in one of the dimensions, right? The negative part is that it penalizes large countries, right? Because a country can be, let's say, a very good producer in one of these 626 innovation capabilities, but this algorithm wouldn't, if it's not relatively specialized, this algorithm would penalize it, right? And on the other side, countries that have very low outputs in these capabilities can also get capabilities, but based on very low numbers of outputs. On the other side, you have absolute capabilities. In this case, you give a capability to a country if this country is let's say, if it's a relevant player in this field, right? If it's and this is indicated by the inverse Herfindahl indicator, right? So in this case, the good part of this algorithm to allocate capabilities is that it reflects the concentration of innovation outputs. In this case, with this data, basically, any country that has around 2% of the world share of a capability gets a capability based on this algorithm. But the negative part is that it has you can get countries that don't have capabilities with this algorithm, and therefore we won't be able to provide information to these countries if we only use absolute capabilities. So the solution we found is we combine both, right? And you can see that by combining these capabilities, we are kind of in the middle with this. So we give all the countries that have absolute capabilities, we give it to them because we understand that by being one of the leaders in a field, you should be able to have the capability on this. But also we give some of the countries that are not leaders but are still making conscious decisions on where to allocate the resources to create this, to have outputs in these fields. They should also have capabilities here. So you see this assignment of capabilities in the right chart, right, where you have so both algorithms combined. So after assigning them, we look at after assigning these capabilities, we look at how often they co-occur in countries, and with that, we build the relatedness and complexity indicators. So in this case, on the left, you see all the 626 capabilities mapped based on how close the relatedness is, right? And on the right, what you see is a heat map of the complexity of these fields. And what you can see here is that on the right, in the lower right end of the chart, you have the most complex capabilities are grouping together, right? So all the capabilities that are on the lower right side are more complex than the rest. So what we do next is we test if the way we are capturing these capabilities and the two charts we showed before follows the expected results that we see in the literature. And basically we find that when countries have high relatedness to a field, they often have the capability that we see in regressions in models 1 and 2. And also you can see that in 3 and 4, when countries increase the relatedness density in the past period, relative to the past period, they also tend to have the capability, so they don't lose it. And also you see that also in the entry models work. So when you increase your relatedness density to a field, you're more likely to enter a new field of related knowledge. And the opposite, when you lose related knowledge to a field, you often lose this capability. The other thing we check here with this capability assignment is to see if the complexity behaves in the way we expect. In this case, we also find it. We find that we find a positive correlation between our indicator of complexity and GDP per capita. And with this out of the way, we are now able to create solutions for our member states, such as this, right? So here, what we want to do is we want to show opportunities for smart diversification for countries. In this case, we have Italy on the left and Kenya on the right. And here, every dot in each of the maps represents one of the 626 capabilities. But in this case, it's a subset of those. It's those capabilities that the countries don't have, right? So on the horizontal axis, you see the relatedness density, how close each of the countries is to each of the technologies. And on the vertical axis, you see the complexity of the capabilities. In this case, the ranking, right? And on the dotted line, you see for each country where they stand on the complexity of their country, right? So the idea here is to show opportunities for each country, and for each country to understand what's the risk to attain a new capability based on the relatedness density that they have, and what is the reward that they can get based on the complexity of the capability, right? And the line indicates that the dotted line indicates that any capability that they attempt to get that is above the line will increase the country's complexity, and therefore would imply that they would grow economically. A second solution we built is what we call the innovation potential. So as you saw in the first donut chart I showed, technologies are very concentrated, and we see many member states that are able to contribute in science and exports, but they lack in technology. And the idea is to show how these 3 dimensions interact in well-functioning ecosystems to help the others find where they have untapped potential based on what they already know how to do. So we start by looking for the connections in the between capabilities that are statistically significant, and we build a network just like the one you have, or you can see on the right. So once we have these the connections between these fields, what we do is we calculate the potential, the potential outputs for each country based on what on these existing connections, assuming that the total potentials have to be the same as the output of the frontier economies that we are where we capture these significant connections. So am I okay with the time, guys?
Yes, you are. You have 5 more minutes.
Okay, good. So calculating the potential outputs can help us inform member states with visualizations such as this, where what we see here is for Indonesia and for Sweden, the blue line indicates the total number of patents that they have. And the other 2 lines, the pink one and the light blue one, they show the expected, in this case, patents that we should be seeing based on science on pink and on production on light blue. So what you see here is something that we see many times for countries like Indonesia, right? Where Indonesia is able to export many products, right? But we don't see these associated patents we should see. We would see if Indonesia were in the innovation frontier. When you compare that with Sweden, you see that the lines are much more, the bars are much more aligned. So the ecosystem is able to transform more efficiently, let's say, their production and their science into technologies. But is this potential relevant? So for that, we formulate 3 hypotheses, right? So the first one is, so let's say, first question is, can this potential explain future technological outcomes? So the hypothesis would be that scientific and production capabilities increase technological outcomes. The second question we have is, can all capabilities achieve equally their potential? So our second hypothesis would be complex capabilities are harder to achieve. And our third question is, are all ecosystems benefiting of their potential? Which would mean that complex ecosystems are better at fulfilling their potential. We create a model using an OLS, right? In which we have, we want to explain the change in outputs in technologies. And we explain it by the past, the previous outputs, in this case with the theta. And we expect the theta to be negative so that we see the convergence. We have beta 1, which is associated with the first hypothesis, right? We expect beta 1 to be positive. Beta 2 is associated with the second hypothesis, and we expect it to be negative. And beta 3 is associated with the third hypothesis. We expect it to be positive, right? So because for higher complex, let's say, capabilities, we expect the potential to be more informative. And then we control. We have control variables. We have fixed effects for time, for countries, and for fields. And what we see in the regression tables is first that the past outputs are consistently significant. They have the negative value expected, right? But I think okay, here, okay. But more importantly, what we see is that the potential that we estimate helps countries can explain this growth, right? The second hypothesis, right? We are not finding that complex capabilities are harder to achieve in terms of potential. So it's equally easy to it's equally hard, let's say, to achieve your potential based on no matter the complexity of the field. And for the third hypothesis we test, we find that the more complex an ecosystem is, the better they are in achieving this potential. We also, in this case, we are looking at how science can transform into technologies, but what we also test is the same, but for how production can transform into technologies, and we find very similar results. In this case, yeah, so basically the results are very similar. In H2, we find some lower significance, right? But that's it. So summing up, we understand that by building on this methodology, we can lay the foundations for long-term growth, resilience, and competitiveness. By having technological landscaping to help policymakers in prioritizing, and by identifying tech transfer bottlenecks between academia and industry. And finally, that embracing principles such as complexity, relatedness, and smart specialization can help making informed strategic decisions that deliver innovation, economic success, and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fede, for such an interesting presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the last, but for sure not least speaker today, which is Dario, very well known already in our community, and we are extremely happy to have him here. So with no further ado, Dario, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Edu. Thanks to you, to Dima, to Martina, to Benji for the invitation. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, Edu, in the introduction, I work for the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is a Directorate General that focuses on providing high-quality research for the purpose of helping the policy DGs of the commissions to better use scientific evidence in their policy actions. And my research, as in the research of Federico and Julio, is in large part focused on using economic complexity and relatedness methods to innovate, to help innovation policies. However, in this talk, I like to focus. I'm going to talk about economic complexity in innovation policies, but briefly, I like to focus in large part to what I think is perhaps the most important novelty in innovation policies that is been emerging in the past few years. And this has to do with the changing approach that is the reflection and the response to a changing, rapidly changing context. I'd want to perhaps give us a tiny disclaimer in the sense that what I'm talking about today is reflecting the thinking of the past couple of years. But of course, we are in the process of there is the process of a new commission starting. therefore, things might change slightly in the next years. However, if one were to judge from early signals that comes from the Draghi report or from the mission letters that the President von der Leyen submitted to the newly appointed commissioners, well, it is fair to expect that the direction that has been taken in the past years is likely to, in large part, continue in the coming ones. So, regarding the context, there has been, I think, I mean, perhaps it's not necessary that I summarize this for everybody. We know that we have been living through several crises in the past years, from economic and financial crisis, from fragmentation of economic and political spaces, supply chain disruptions that resulted from COVID-19, but also for climate change, from the war in Ukraine and other wars, ongoing wars, and overall rising geopolitical tensions have questioned the open nature of our economy that has been so far. And at the same time, we have observed, perhaps looking at a longer time horizon, a steady erosion of the competitive position in terms of like economic position, but also technological positions of the European Union, losing its share to mainly to China, but also the rest of the world is definitely losing ground with respect to where it was 25 years ago. So in this context, the Commission, but the EU in general, has tried to come up with a response, which has not been easy because the open nature of our economy is one of the founding elements of the Commission. So, of the Commission of the European Union. So it has to be in a balancing act between keeping our economies open and globally integrated, because we do believe that is indeed has been a force for good. You can see it here in the words of the President von der Leyen. But at the same time, the world has become more contested and geopolitical. So a new strategy that balances these things had to come across, and this perhaps could be can be seen throughout many documents of the EU. One of the, I think one key one that one could look at if is interested into digging deeper is looking at the European Economic Security Strategy that involves all EU institutions and was published in June 2023. But so what does it mean concretely? What can be done concretely to reduce EU vulnerability and enhance its security to this global changing context? And the European Economic Security Strategy outlines two main steps. The first one is the identification of critical products and technologies, and the second is the design of policy actions. The first one may seem kind of obvious, but it has been somewhat a departure from previous economic and policy of the past, as it has, like, you know, it has been the policy direction that has always been taken as the main one. Has been focused on the idea of getting policy that are horizontal across products and often horizontal across technologies. So the idea of targeting or designing policy action directly to critical products and critical technologies is to a large extent a novelty in the policy landscape. So what I want to show is that this has been done in a very pragmatic way. Here, for instance, I show like a document from DG GROW in which they identify, they put forth a methodology on how to identify critical products that may become problematic for the Union, and they do so by combining the information on 3 indicators. They look at the concentration of the market in a specific product, the importance in demand for the EU, so looking at the input value of a specific product over the total, that is extra EU over the total input value of the European Union, and to look at how it is important in supply. So looking at extra EU imports over the total value of exports that the EU has in a specific product. By using like UN Comtrade data, analyzing over 5,400 products, the reports, for instance, finds that 204 products are sensitive, and they outline also like from which country the dependency is hanging on. A second thing is not only about looking at critical products, but also looking at critical technologies. There has been, for instance, an effort from the Commission that by looking at 3 criteria, that is looking at the enabling and transformative nature of technology, by looking at the risk of civil and military fusion and the risk of misuse of the technology. They come up with a list of several technologies, of which 4 are deemed the most critical, which are semiconductor, AI, quantum technologies, and biotech. And perhaps a combination of the 2, there are technologies that are critical in manufacturing. So a parallel effort in the Commission has been to identify these critical technologies that have also been named in the past key enabling technologies that are advanced technologies that are used in industry and in manufacturing. And for instance, there have been selected 14 technologies such as advanced manufacturing technology, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, advanced materials, biotechnology, and so forth. So with this, as I was mentioning in the introductory slide, the issue has been how to design a policy response that addresses this criticality that we can identify in technologies and in products in the context of an open economy that is the EU. And one of the concepts that has been circulating in policy circles has been the one of open strategic autonomy. So the idea that to put front and center the strategic nature of some technologies and some goods, while acknowledging the importance of remaining open, maintaining an economy open to international connections. And in fact, some of you have been to a conference that we organized at the JRC last year, the Concordia conference, in which policymakers and academics gathered in Seville to discuss how to square these 2 concepts, which in some way they go against each other. Elements of open strategic autonomy that for instance, can be found in this report that has been published by the GRC following that conference, is trying to find enhanced self-sufficiency in critical sector, but maintaining increased openness to global trade and cooperations. At the same time, having a Europe that is more united and assertive. So in concrete terms, then there have been like a variety of policy responses, some of which classical horizontal policy responses that have embedded this concept into their design. But at the same time, there has been an increase in vertical sectoral initiatives that are designed to specifically address criticality in a specific sector, such as advanced material, biomanufacturing, or the production of computer chips. So coming towards the end of my talk, I would like to talk a little bit about just a couple of slides on the economic complexity contribution to all of these. If you read, I take here like as infographics from the OECD, but the European Economic Security Strategy also has the similar, a very, very, very similar concept outlined. One could think of 3 ways in which it is possible to strengthen technological and strategic autonomy. One is protection, one is promotion, and the other one is projection. I believe in the EU documents they call it partnership. So the possibility of linking to other partners to address a critical technology or a critical product. I believe that the contribution of economic complexity will come from mostly from the promotion side. So it is naturally well placed to guide policy aim at promoting industrial and technological performance. And I give you an example. For instance, advanced materials has been identified as a critical technology for manufacturing. So we were asked to contribute to this analysis to provide some economic complexity perspective on advanced materials. So we further subdivide advanced materials into sub-technological classes, and we identified which regions in Europe have high patenting we first identified which of these subclasses were critical in the sense that they had a lower number of patents produced compared to US and China, and the gap was not closing. So we identified some of these classes that were critical within advanced materials, and one of these is carbon polymers. So in the example here, then we took carbon polymers and we figure out which regions are actually currently active in carbon polymers. This is perhaps a more traditional way of looking at things. This is the left panel of this figure. But economic complexity can go beyond that because you can look at regions that are currently not specialized or have not active in this particular technology, but have been active in technologies that are related to the target one. So this can open up new possible avenues to do promotion strategies that are not hanging on promoting the regions that are already very active in this particular technology. And similarly, we have, I bring another example this comes from the SRIP report, is Science Research Innovation Performance Report, is a flagship report from RTD. We wrote a chapter in which we focus on green technologies, which is not strategically critical in a geopolitical sense. It's definitely a priority in the EU. And we look in the same way we look at technologies that in which the European Union has been lagging behind, and we have been looking at what are the regions that have the potential of developing these technologies based on the related activities that they do, and looking at the same time here. This is the same graph as before, but combined into one image. The blues indicate regions that are strong innovators in the selected technology. This is emission reduction in aeronautics. But we can also look at the orange regions that are regions that currently do not have a vibrant in patenting activities in emission reduction aeronautics, but they have a vibrant economic innovative activity in technologies that are related to emission reduction in aeronautics. So just to wrap up, the future of EU competitiveness require high complex policies and actions that need to navigate a rapidly changing context. And the EU response to this new context has been that of open strategic autonomy. There have been a number of initiatives that were set up, and economic complexity, we think it can play an important role in shaping these policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dario. I'd also like to thank the other two speakers, so Julio and Federico, for accepting our invitation, and to all three of you for the fantastic presentations. I think there was this underlying theme of economic complexity and relatedness that sort of united the three talks, but you also addressed them from different perspectives, and you talked about different methods for estimating capabilities, and also in Dario's case, from the perspective of I think economic and technological resilience. So yes, thank you very much. We have time now, plenty of time for questions. I think there was one in the chat that I'll start with, but then open it to everyone if you want to ask a question. So let me go first to the one in the chat. I think it was directed to Julio.
Yeah, the one about regional data on global value chains.
Right, yes, yeah.
Yes, it's, I would say at the global level, I don't think that data exists. I would I even defer to Eduardo. I think Eduardo was working with this kind of data for his own PhD dissertation. Please, Eduardo, correct me if I'm wrong. But I feel that I would say I'm almost sure that this data might exist for Europe or for any subdivision of Europe, depending in the case of Dario, the European Commission, the European Union, etc. But I don't think that this is globally. What we did in the World IP report of 2017 is try to map basically the different segments of the supply chain and try to see how much basically intangible capital was contributing to this. And for that, we needed to see the contribution of labor, of tangible capital. We have an initiative of doing that better, that is led by another section, the same colleagues that do the GII. So it would be nice to check. But in none of those, we managed to go subnational. So because it's very hard. However, I was in EPIP 2 weeks ago, and the chief economist of the Brazilian IP office, who is part of that project and is contributing Brazilian estimate, he says that for Brazil they can estimate that subnationally. Right? They can go and have basically. You will require basically input-output tables at subnational level. And that's the very tricky part. There is no consolidated source for that. So I apologize to Francesco. Maybe he's looking for that data for his thesis.
A few years back, we wrote a paper in which we did an estimate with Mark Thyssen. I think I can add it in the chat. But it's the regional part, the regional focus. It's only in Europe, so we took like a global input-output data set and regionalized only the part that pertain to Europe. But I don't know if this can help. I can add it in the chat.
Fede, I don't know if you want to add something on the trademarks on this.
Yes. So basically, the next step of the methodology that we created for WIPO is to add trademarks as a new dimension as a proxy for to replace what we see in the exports. And with that, the idea is to go subnational also with our methodology. So.
Because patents and scientific publications allows you to go subnationally if you geocode them, right? As we did for the World IP report in 2019. So if we geocode the trademark data, which is not without caveats, and particularly for Francesco's question, that doesn't mean having an input-output table, right? You could mimic that supply chain with co-currents and things like this, and assuming, but you're not really having the flows, right? You're having those basically sectors or industries from the trademark data appearing. And of course, trademark has a bias for more end consumer kind of products and services than B2B, and of course, in a supply chain, you're particularly interested on the B2B.
Great, thank you all. There's one more question in the chat that just popped up from Guillermo. So he's asking, where can I learn more about the JRC's work on technologies for the green transition in Europe? And Dario, if you can share also links to maybe some specific documents if you have.
Sure. I mean, the GRC is a very large institution. So like we have more than 3,000 people working for it. So there is quite some heterogeneous work. I can quickly try to look up what can be a few angles. But perhaps you can be a bit more specific, like if you're interested in the GRC work on green technologies, perhaps it's a bit more focused question. I can address you better.
Yeah, feel free to add more details in the chat, and then we can go back to this question. There's one more for Francesco that just came. Do you think the green transition will stimulate a geography of innovation different from the business as usual, with a few hubs where knowledge agglomerates?
The question is, we think that would happen or that it should happen?
Whether it would stimulate. And I think that's a question for everyone, basically, because...
So I don't know. The only thing I can add, and also to connect to the previous one, in the World IP Report 2022, we actually discussed also green technologies. And there's a companion paper done by a consultant that Joëlle Noyer from the Graduate Institute. So she has done a lot of work on green tech with a focus on Europe in general, her research, but in our report it's more global. So there might be some interesting stuff there too, for those who are asking. And clearly there we were addressing this question, in which extent mission-oriented policies could be a solution to these kind of problems. And of course, if such a mission-oriented, you will need to agglomerate or not somewhere, right? We were not necessarily thinking of regions in that report, so we're thinking more about countries. But I think it's an open question. Richard Nelson, who was the reviewer of the report, he was very adamant that he didn't think mission-oriented is the solution for these kind of problems. But for him, he was using the example of that and education as where mission-oriented will not solve, because the incentives are not there to make it work. So that's why I was joking with if it would or if it should, because I think we can make a rational case that you can have some competition by having a couple of hubs competing, but a lot of resources being poured to those and finding the solution that then can be beneficial for everyone. And you can make the analogy with the COVID vaccine, right? Because basically what happened for the COVID vaccine. However, it seems to be much harder to put that in place, right? Without such an imminent problem as the COVID crisis and pandemic, we don't seem to have enough, I would say, policies, mechanism, right, or political will globally coordinated, right? It's independently in many places happens. I don't think it happens coordinated. And this is a little bit what we discuss, and this is a little bit what we fear in the international organizations, that there is a lack of coordination and multilateralism on this, on a problem that clearly requires everybody on board. So that's my take on the question.
Thanks, Julio. I don't know if Dario, Federico, you'd like to add from your perspective or from your experience?
No, sorry, I was like copy pasting some links. Are we still on the concentration of innovation regarding the green transition? I mean, it's hard to say that. I don't expect like to transform new technology. I don't expect to transform the world into a flat world. It may change somehow the concentration, but I think it would be a matter of slope. The general idea that agglomeration economies exist and innovation is in particularly prone to super concentration. I don't think this is going to change, but this is my 2 cents on the matter.
Thank you. Federico, I don't know if you want to pitch in, or we can also move to the next question. There was another more broad question in the box.
No, very similar to Dario. I don't think it would change a lot. Yeah.
Okay, there's another, as I said, more broad question, but I think it's quite interesting. So the question is, how does the identification of critical technologies contribute to the digital and green transitions?
Perhaps I can take this one. I mean, I think the question put this way, I think the 2 things can be orthogonal in the sense that there are different objectives. The strategic nature of a technology may or may not be related to the greenness of the technology or to the green transition. I think in general there is no reason to expect that they are positively correlated or anti-correlated. I'd say that in this respect, then one has to do separate efforts to identify strategic technologies and green technologies and make sure that they're both addressed in different ways. I don't know, just to make an example, identification of green technologies, since I presented, most of my presentation was on the identification of strategic technologies. There is a unit in my organization in Civil that produces this document, which are called BREF documents, that are like best available technologies for pollution abatement. And they really like their technical documents where they look in industries what technologies are used and which are the best reference to lower the emission of a particular production process. So this is a very clear identification of technologies that are useful for the green transition.
Great, thank you, Dario. Yes, I'll just point out that all the speakers are sharing links to different publications and reports in the group chats. So feel free to everyone who asked a question and who didn't, the resources are there. There's one more question that came to us. It's not in the group chat, so I will read it out. I think it goes to all 3 speakers. The question comes from Luca Serafini. He's asking, do you still consider the smart specialization strategy a relevant tool for regional development and innovation? And what methodologies would you recommend for effectively evaluating its impact, especially in relation to concepts like economic complexity? And the follow-up question is, do you believe it requires further support or complementary measures from the European Commission to maximize its effectiveness?
I can take the more general part and we'll let Dario reply on the European part. No, I don't know. In our opinion, I would say absolutely. It's extremely valid. So the 2 things, the smart specialization, or some people like to call it smart diversification, makes a lot of sense. And certainly metrics like relatedness and complexity, to name a few out of many others, right? And Dario was presenting a few as well. And variations of this are extremely important. I have worked with Dominic Foray, who was one of the creators of smart specialization. So I have always to defend the smart specialization, I think, out of legacy. But more importantly, I think he will agree, is the concept behind it, right? We have to be married with concepts that we believe, and not necessarily the metrics. There are many metrics that can help, and I would say, linking with the previous question, some of our metrics, sometimes they also, by design, they suffer from a little bit of zero-sum game, right? In defining relatedness and of course then complexity, by design, if a country does more, it means that someone gets pushed out maybe of a specialization because of how is the algorithm, which in some cases might not mean that that country does not have the capability. So the main focus, and coming back to the question on smart specialization, the main focus on smart specialization and smart diversification is basically not to try to replicate the same model everywhere. And that's extremely powerful. And that's, I think, is still relevant and is valid. The regions and the charts that Dario was showing were very, very clear. Another element that this kind of methodologies brings out, and it was very clear again in the same map, is this idea of complementarity. So the same way that the algorithm can tell you, in the case of relatedness and complexity, that a country or a region is pushed out just because others were faster and then have more relative specialization. It also tells you where to find partners. Right. So in those potential, I don't know how Dario was computing the potential, but it was similar to ours, at least in spirit. Basically, you are thinking of complementaries of those capabilities, those technologies that are complementary to the ones that you have. And that allows you to collaborate and so on. So in that spirit, I think these metrics and certainly the smart specialization concept is extremely, extremely valid. How the European Commission has to fund this more and so on, I will let Dario maybe or someone else to tackle that much harder question.
Thank you, Julio. This is also above my pay grade. No, in general, I think smart specialization strategies are like more relevant than ever, because it's what change is the way we identify important sectors where address like policy. But the methodology, I think it's good that we already had many years of experience in smart specialization, because it's one of the tools for the implementation of the policies that have become more vertical in nature. And smart specialization was a way to do in somehow vertical policies, because there was a selection of priorities that often were industry codes. So smart specialization was already a way in which was the European Union was doing indirectly vertical policies. And now perhaps it's going to become a bit more direct, but in terms of the way policies are implemented, I think it's not gonna change much. There is an element of top-down that is perhaps different compared to the past. That before smart specialization, they had this idea that were like the regions themselves coming up with based on their competence, coming up with whatever priority they would like. Perhaps now there are ideas that come from strategic autonomy point of view, but also from the green transition. Not only the strategic autonomy, also the green transition as an element of top-down that was not present in early conceptualization of smart specialization. So there might be some difference in the way they will develop, but I believe they'll remain strong. And in terms of evaluation, there was like also a question about methods for evaluating. I mean, with respect to my own research, I think it would be interesting to assess, but I don't think anybody has done that. And I've been thinking for a while what would be an optimal strategy, and I don't have it yet. A way to assess whether a strategy is in line with the complexity or relatedness indicators, and depending on like how close you are to a target priority in some knowledge, technology, or product space, how successful you are in your smart specialization strategy. I think it would be interesting to address this question rigorously.
But Dario, would you agree that these methods, if we want to fancily call it relying on big data, they're kind of bottom up as well, right? This is not the old school policy making that you will ask, the three more lobbying industries in a country, or the council of elder scientists telling you where the next research, right? How should we split the budget of R&D? So I agree 100% of what you're saying, that bottom-up was pretty much part of the principle of smart specialization. But I think this new generation of metrics, and this is a little bit related with the AI question that there is also in the chat there, allow us to still map. So yes, it's a little bit top-down in the sense that you need technical people to compute that, but you're trying to somehow map what is happening in those places, where those capabilities, where those skills, where those know-hows are, imperfectly, given the data that we have, very imperfectly, I would say, but in a way that at least is not coming with a bias from the top, right? Not at the beginning, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, this element of top down exactly as an element of novelty that I think is being injected into smart specialization, or will be injected into smart specialization. Maybe injected in smart specialization, because we have now like clear priorities. But I don't think this would change the nature of how smart specialization policy would be, were originally conceptualized. So the bottom-up energies, they should. I expect them to remain a very fundamental element of the policy. And with respect to using complexity and relatedness indicators to identify these policies, yes. And if you're these priorities, in this case, yes, that would be definitely. You could configure that as a bottom-up way of looking at what's actually there.
Thank you, but we're getting very close to the end of the session, so I want to ask basically two more questions that came in the chat very quickly. One, I think, is more directed to Federico, and the question is, could you say something about the challenges and opportunities of identifying, I lost it now, relevant capabilities in areas that are quickly evolving, and the example was AI. And I think a more general question that I think goes again to everyone, and that should be the last one, is how complexity can help to guarantee a more balanced impact of the twin transition in terms of social outcomes, so inequality, leaving no place behind, and so on, or can it at least be able to help in this regard? So Federico, let's start with you, and then address the other question.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because at least with the methodology that we have, we would assume that emerging technologies would appear in a selected number of countries, right? So for many of the cases, we would see them as being complex capabilities, right? But yeah, the fluctuation of the complexity indicator can be an issue, at least in the beginning of in a nascent field, right? And that is something for sure we need to look at. Yeah. I don't know if Julio wants to add something on that, but.
Well, basically, I think it's a great question, because it's something that we ask ourselves, right? And we have been working with Federico and the rest of the team and our partners, how we can make these metrics to evolve over time. And at the same time, we have some member states that have very few data points, especially on patents and sometimes even on scientific publications. So they fluctuate a lot, and then your metric is not that useful. So it's is where we would like to be, right? We would like that our metrics, regardless if it is relatedness and complexity as we traditionally know it, or any other metric, we would like to capture that singularity of emerging fields. Knowing that, of course, sometimes those emerging fields are also poorly capturing the raw data, right? But what defines an emerging field in scientific publications? What defines a new product in the export or GDP, right? In industrial surveys, etc. So the same happens with patents. Some of the people participating here, they were in a seminar that was organized at WIPO, and we had the head of the International Patent Classification unit here at WIPO discussing this, and it's very interesting, the process, how they create a new IPC classification and so on, which happens way after. So you need to have a certain number of patents already there for that to be consolidated. So this means that unfortunately our nomenclatures, they do not move as fast as technologies do. So and this was a little bit implicit in what I mentioned about the AI report and what we did on the World IP report of 2022 as well, which is also in chapter 3 for those who look at the chat. It's evolving. The AI, the LLMs, is evolving so fast that it's very hard to map it all the time. So it's a nice challenge to have at the same time. So I guess keep posted to see what we do, and if you have any brilliant ideas, bring it to us. We will be happy to stand on your shoulders.
Right. Well, thank you. Again, I think we're running out of time, so we have to wrap up the webinar. But it was a lot of food for thought, a lot of links, a lot of reports and articles to follow up on. So I think in that sense, it was quite productive. So thank you very much again to the speakers, to the RSA for assisting us in hosting this webinar. Please stay in touch and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for more events. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening over the next year, and I'm sure Sprint will keep growing. So thank you again, and see you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Sprint community.